Hello and welcome. I'm Claire Badger. I'm the head of teacher professional development here at Inner Drive, and it is a huge pleasure to be welcoming you to the first of what we hope will be one of many flash webinar debates, where we take a slightly controversial bit of evidence from the research and we have two people sort of debating the pros and cons of that research. And tonight's topic is all about pre-questions. For those of you who are not sure what pre-questions are, and you just came along to see two people have a debate about it, pre-questions, or you might have heard it called pre-testing, that is a strategy where students are tested on a particular topic before they've received instruction on it. So we have our two debaters on the call with me. In the yellow corner is my colleague Bradley Busch, the psychologist here at Inner Drive. Bradley is going to be debating the pre-question side of things. And in the opposite corner, fighting him on this issue, is the wonderful Groshell. He's in the blue corner over there. And Zach will be arguing the case against pre-questions. Zach is the director of Step Lab North America, so joining us from across the pond this evening, which is fantastic. Just to give you a sense of how this is going to work, each of our debaters is going to have 3 minutes, no interruptions, no questions, to put their case forward. Then there will be a chance for them to ask each other some questions. During that time, if you've got questions you want to pose to our debaters, please do pop them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat throughout this. And then towards the end, I will pose some of those questions to our team. And before we get going, we are particularly keen to know where people stand at the moment, to see if either of our guests have a chance to change your mind. So we should be able to pop a poll on there. There that poll is. So have a little bit of an answer of that poll, and we'll see where we start. Hello. Big fan so far. I have to say, I am voting for Zach, much to my colleague Bradley's annoyance. I'm very much in the blue corner with Zach, and I'm not at all sure about pre-questions. So let's see. But it does seem, yeah, so a few of you not sure what pre-questions are. Big fan is winning at the moment. So Zach, I'm with you, mate. We're going to convert those people, okay? Cool. I think that's probably most people voted now. So if we end the poll. And then, Bradley, I think we are over to you to put forward the case for pre-questions. Off you go.
So thank you so much, Zach. Thanks for joining us. I'm so confident that I can further enhance people's faith in pre-questions. I thought I'd use the first 20 seconds of my 3 minutes to actually suggest next time we do this, Zach and Claire, we should have music that, like when WWE wrestlers or boxers come out as part of their ring walk, when we do the announcements. So yes, let's talk about pre-questions. I first came across the pre-question research having read some of the research around retrieval practice. So retrieval practice being you teach content and then you quiz students afterwards on the content that they've been taught, which makes perfect sense because you're forced to think hard about the material. Whereas pre-questions struck me as quite odd, because pre-questions saying we should ask some questions before we teach the material. And I have to say, it didn't chime naturally with me. It feels counterintuitive. So I wasn't looking to go into it being a fan, but for me, if we're going to be evidence informed, we follow where the evidence points. And for me, I've seen a lot of research papers that suggest that when students get asked questions before you're teaching the material, they remember that material more afterwards. Now, we should note the effect sizes aren't as big as things like retrieval practice. So we're talking smaller impact, but I think for such minimal time costs, they're really beneficial. And I think the research does support it. What I find most interesting about the pre-question research is why might it help? What's the mechanism that underpins why asking a question first will improve learning? And we don't know for sure. Different researchers have speculated different mechanisms, and there's 4 that I want to touch on. So the first is about the psychology of curiosity. Our brain hates unanswered questions. It's basically the psychology of clickbait. If I say to you, there are 5 things you need to do this summer, and you won't believe what number 4 on that list is, people want to know what that answer is. Pre-questions work the same way. Our brain hates unanswered questions. It wants that closure. It's cognitively on the hook until we have that closure. So pre-questions can help increase that curiosity and engagement. So benefit mechanism number 1, I think, is curiosity. Mechanism number 2 is all about the power of predictions. We know there's power in research that when you predict the answer, even if you get it wrong, we're more likely to remember the correct information. This is known as the hypercorrection effect. So we shouldn't live in fear of students getting things wrong if that's part of the learning process. And that might happen in pre-questions. So we've got curiosity and we've got power prediction. The third one is, for me, because working memory is so small, we need to find mechanisms to signal to students what is the important information that we're going to teach. And pre-questions, I think, do this. So, for example, if I say to you, how many fish do you think there are in the Atlantic Ocean? Then in 20 minutes' time, when I come to that part in the lesson and I go, and here's how many fish there are in the Atlantic Ocean, your brain has gone, okay, this must be the important bit that I need to pay attention to, because Bradley wouldn't have asked that pre-question beforehand if it didn't matter. So I think it can help signal to students what are the important things. And the fourth and final mechanism, there was a study done last year. We should note it was done with older students, but they found when we asked them pre-questions, they were more likely after the lesson to independently go study those topics themselves. So it acts as a bit of a signal to them about how to guide their future study themselves. And that's really interesting because one of the researchers described this to me as the power of retrieval is you're always kind of going back. You're retrieving stuff you learn. Whereas the power of pre-questions is it drives the learning forward. It helps not only signal the attention in the lesson, but it helps signals what you should focus on after the lesson as well. So for me, I think the evidence, small effect sizes, but very quick intervention, so I don't mind that. Helps learning, really easy to implement, just one short multiple choice or free range question, and a range of mechanisms such as curiosity, prediction, attention, and self-regulated behavior to justify it.
All right, nice and punchy there, Bradley, putting forward the case for pre-questions. So we have our counter arguments being put forward by the wonderful Zach Groshell. Off you go, Zach. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you. Don't start it right away. I just want to say,
Okay,
just want
time is ticking.
just want to say thank you to Bradley and the team here at InterDrive for inviting me. I just think that having conversations like this about something as perhaps small and innocuous as like pre-questions is part of being a professional and being a teacher. I practiced this beforehand with my friend Andrew Watson, and he said many times, he said, "You sound mad. You sound angry." And I went, "I'm not though. I just think this is so cool." So I hope I don't come across that way, and I just really respect everything Bradley just said. And now my 3 minutes begins. um, you know, it's interesting. I'm going to focus on a few different buckets here that I think are important. One of those is around it being pre-questions being easy to implement. I don't find that that is the case. Let's think about our own classroom block. You have students in the hallway or the corridors who are passing through and they enter into your classroom. And in my school, we begin all lessons with a do now of past material, right? Do now is on the board. Students come in, they sit down, they get started right away, pencils moving. In my experience, again, not from research, but in my experience with these do nows, giving students any questions whatsoever that they do not know how to answer is a recipe for misbehavior. It is encouraging students to essentially start the lesson off on a bad foot, turning and chatting about something, laughing off the fact that, mate, should I know this? Do I not know this? Is it me? Is it because I wasn't paying attention? Am I not smart? A feeling of self-concept or self-doubt can creep in. And what do? You end up just kind of clowning around to start the lesson. So with many, many different trials using do nows to start the lesson off, we landed on something I think should be common across all schools that use do nows. It should only be material that students can confidently answer independently in silence so I can do the register and then get my lesson started right off the bat. Now, let's say then after the do now, we're going to go ahead and do a pre-question thing. Is this pre-question in their booklet? Is it in their notebook? And we're now going to do a pre-question quiz after the do now quiz. How much time left do I have in the lesson to teach, right? Pre-questions, I think everything Bradley said are those are the mechanisms that create that kind of learning and that generate maybe some curiosity, some forward thinking. But what they do when we create a separate quiz outside of the lesson is they separate the question from the model. And in doing so, you end up reducing an association between the question and the model. I think it's bad instructional design. A real good design would be that the question is paired with what the answer is so that students have an opportunity to receive feedback, to know what it is. So spending more time in the lesson with the questions would be preferable. Or as we know with retrieval practice is a very important and an effective technique. Spending more time in retrieval afterwards, where students are successful, students are feeling the motivation of getting their of being able to retrieve from past answers and getting that space practice. This would be a better use of our time. And not only that, I believe that there are other anticipatory sets, preparation activities that would be better, like asking questions that kids know the answer to induct them into the content, or perhaps telling a story, right? This is where you sort of invite students in and kind of hook them into what are we talking about. Having a little sort of sterile test that asks them questions for which we're going to have this delay and then we're going to learn the content later. It feels like poor instructional design for many of these reasons. And I do not believe, to my final point, I do not believe that the research is as solid when it comes to these comparison studies as my opponent suggests. I believe most of the research is simply testing pre-questions against not having any other form of information presented at the beginning of the lesson. So those are some of my reasons. Bradley was much more articulate than I was, but let's go to the next phase.
I would not say that at all, Zach. I think you were extremely articulate and with your points there. Thank you very much. So we are now on to the next section of tonight's debate, which is where our debaters, or combatants, as we might want to call them, are able to pose questions to each other. So I suppose, Bradley, do you have any questions for Zach?
Yes. I know we're trying to argue against each other. I would echo what Zach said in the last point of a lot of the studies do compare pre-questions versus, I don't know how you describe it, like business as normal or kind of a control group. I would very much like to see more studies which compare it against different things. And this is a fairly new body of research, and I don't think we're quite there yet. So I'm certainly with you on that. That'd be something I would like to see. One question I'd like to get your thoughts on, Zach, was this idea, because it was a worry that I had initially of I ask you a question, you don't know the answer. Does that in the first minute of a lesson make someone go, it confirms all my doubts and worries. You know, I'm not a math person. I am dumb. I don't belong in this learning environment. And that was something you kind of mentioned in your talk there. I had a teacher recently tell me that they thought for students with quite low self-esteem, pre-questions might be a really effective strategy because you can evidence to them that 20 minutes ago or at the beginning of this lesson, you didn't know this thing. And now you're leaving my lesson having gained knowledge, and now you do know the answer to this thing. And we know that previous learning and performance is a great predictor of motivation and confidence. So I think maybe pre-questions, if handled badly, might make people feel dumb. But if handled sensitively, can be a great path to show you have learnt and improved and developed in my lesson because that's what you're going to do. I'm going to teach you stuff. So I just thought I'd see if you thought there is any scope for it being able to be used as a mechanism to improve confidence and self-esteem, as opposed to only the worry about it might make people feel dumb if they don't know the answer initially.
I think like so Patrice Bain in Powerful Teaching really talks about sort of metacognitive feedback in that regard, and I think that that's important. I don't think that that's necessarily something that's built into pre-questions. You can do that while you're modeling, right? You model and you say, so notice the steps that I'm taking as I model this material. And this is new and this is tough. And when I was learning this, this was the part that it was tricky to me, right? And I think in the same regard, you can with your assessments afterwards, compare the progress of students. It, but you make a good point. I think that's an interesting way of using pre-questions is sort of to orient students towards, a sense of accomplishment
Mhm.
where, look what I couldn't do before, look what I can do now. I think you can do the same thing through metacognitive talk with modeling, but I like the point.
Okay, thanks.
Is it my turn to ask
Zach.
questions? Yeah.
Yeah. Zach, any questions for Bradley? And sorry, just before you start, if anyone else on the call has questions for either of our participants in the debate, please do pop them into chat. I can ask them on your behalf. I've got several that we were debating in the Inner Drive office earlier as well that I can post to them. So do pop those questions in. Thank you. I've already got one there, which is amazing. Over to you, Zach, to pose a question to Bradley.
Okay. Bradley, who is my uncle?
So, Uncle Groshell is. I have
Uh,
no idea who your uncle is.
and so what was my first password on a computer?
I heart Bradley? No, no
And
idea. No idea.
and what is the secret code between me and my dad that my brother does not know?
I don't know.
I mean, I think these are my questions,
Yeah.
but what I'm trying to illustrate as a point is I remain skeptical of the ability for certain types of factual questions to
Yeah.
inspire curiosity. And some of the research in this area is as simple as how many families first arrived on Easter Island when it was first colonized. And you go, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, and you get the answer and it doesn't have that satisfying feeling. Maybe my question for you is there certain content that pre-questions would be more amenable to? And then are there other things that perhaps we should really avoid with pre-questions, knowing that the research has not explored this as much as it should?
So I think it is a really, really good question, and it's a good point because I'm pretty sure pre-questions will only work for some questions better than others. And my gut feeling, I don't know for sure, but my gut feeling is it would probably work really well if someone could have an educated guess as to the answer. So I think you have to have some sort of knowledge on the thing, or else if you are, because for your ones, I wasn't predicting those answers because I've got no knowledge to make a prediction from. I'd have to do a complete guess in the dark as to what your uncle's name is. So I think the type of question makes a big difference. I think it's important. What is interesting now is I bet everyone on this call wants to know how many families first settled on Easter Island. And if you were to tell them, they would probably remember it in a week's time because we have created a bit of anticipation and curiosity about that thing. So I think they can be done badly. I think it should be in the ballpark of someone could have an educated guess on it. I'd almost certainly assume it works better for some type of questions than others. And if done badly, I think it could have a negative effect. But I think that's true for most things. Like most things done badly won't have a very satisfying result. So yeah, that's I guess what I think in terms of those.
And if I could build on that too with
Yeah, yeah,
your
go for it.
the anticipation there. Um remember like this is where like I feel like pre-questions are ripe for lethal mutation because the original research puts you in a computer-based environment and you're meant to answer a series of questions that appear in the text. Now, if I said this to you, which is technically a pre-question but is not how the research is done, if I said this to this group, how many families first arrived on Easter Island back when it was first settled? Have a think. The answer is one. Now that one family, and I go up to the board, right? Now notice how I've oriented you into this. I've capitalized on your curiosity. I've used a lot of like emotional resonance, and I've sort of tried to envelop your attention through what I'm saying. However, I did not give you a pretest of a bunch of questions. Divorce the pretest from a text you were going to read later on in a second part of the lesson. I feel like what pre-questions could prove in terms of principles still can be explored. I don't think that the format that is in the research is a very good way of teaching because of the fact you separate out the model from the question in this very artificial way that's easy for researchers to study, but not great instruction, if that makes sense.
It does, and I tell you what. So it's interesting. That's not my worry about pre-questions. So my worry about pre-questions is the mutation of you ask the question, and then we expect the students to find out the answer themselves. And I think, and then that leads to all sorts of very discovery learning and doesn't capitalize on the benefits of direct instruction. So for me, that would be the thing. If you're going to win this debate, that would be the line that I'd suggest to go down. The terms of separating the model from the question, like that stuff, I think we're talking around the edges and isn't too much of a worry for me.
Well, a lot of us here design booklets, right, for our schools. We have to ask ourselves, do we put in pre-questions
Yep.
at the beginning of every lesson,
Yep.
right? A lot of us are in the realm, I know Helen's here, of designing textbooks, right? Are we going to put in pre-questions at the beginning of every
But
lesson,
but
right?
just to go on that point is I think there's nothing wrong with variation. If you started every lesson, every single period of every lesson in every day at school with the exact same format, I think some of the impact, even if that's a really good format, you will get a diminishing return if it's every single time. Whereas having the ability to where you think is appropriate as a professional, go for this based on what I'm teaching. I think a pre-question is a good option today. We shouldn't be afraid of having that variation and not having dogma around. It has to be all or nothing for one side, one way to start a lesson.
I'm just going to interject. Sorry, I just because I think it's important that we get some of our participant questions thrown out to our team. Kent has asked, and this is one for you, Bradley. I think you were just about touching on it, to be honest, about where you would put pre-questions in a lesson design.
Yeah.
But the second part of Kent's question was, if you use pre-questions, would you label them as such so students know that they're not supposed to be able to answer them?
Good question. And I think, Zach, you can probably testify to what you've read in the research as well. I think generally they come at the start of the lesson. I think, well, mainly because I think that's experimental design, is you do the question and then there's some content. I guess in theory, if you had different topics within a lesson or different segments of the lesson, it wouldn't necessarily have to be at the start. But I think it's before you introduce the content. So naturally, I would imagine most would go for it at the start. Would I label it a pre-question? I don't think that's the thing that any researcher or third party such as me could answer. I think it depends on your teaching style, your relationship with your students. I sometimes think technical words are really important from a research perspective. So pre-questions, retrieval, metacognition, so that researchers are talking about the same thing. Whether that's the language you choose to use with your students, probably depends on your students and your teaching style.
What about Zach's point that if we have these routines in place for beginnings of their lesson, they start with do now, that's retrieval practice.
Yeah.
Students are used to that routine. Surely you're going to disrupt that clean start to a lesson if you start every now and then bunging in some pre-questions. That's
Yeah,
also to Bradley.
I thought that was the weakest part of Zach's argument because for me, pre-questions, I don't think everything has to serve every purpose. We're not talking Swiss Army pocket knives, so I don't need a tool that's really good for memory and learning to also have to be the very best tool for behavior management. In terms of are these a good tool for learning, I think there's a really good argument to be made. Are they a really good tool for behavior management? I think you can suggest probably not. But I also know someone who's as brilliant as an educator as Zach is would certainly be able to control the behavior of his class, even if he did ask them a pre-question once in a while, because he's just that good.
You're such a flatterer. That's not going to win you the debate, mate. So what else do we have here? Jean has just got a clarification. Bradley, were you correct that a pre-question strategy could just be one question?
Yeah, sometimes in the research it can be one question. I've spoken to a few researchers about this, about could it be free recall? So Zach's example of how many families settled on Easter Island. Some say it could be multiple choice. It can be verbal Q&A. Again, we'd like to see more studies looking at the very different types. But conceptually, I wouldn't see why. I haven't seen any study that talks about a limitation of the number, and that's part of the beauty of it. I think is they're quick to ask, quick to answer. We're not talking time heavy content here.
Cool. I know we said we were going to keep this short, but it's generally interesting and I want to know some of the answers. So I'm going to keep going. So Amy has asked, would why or how questions be a better use of a pre-question rather than a sort of what question that might better tap into direct attention and thinking? It might mean that you've got less sort of random guessing of numerical answers or something. Any
Yeah,
thoughts from either of you, actually?
I mean, I think you can definitely make a case for why that might improve curiosity a little bit, because I don't think factual closed questions will naturally do as much. Don't know. What do you think on that one, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes to like how do you open up a lesson, that anticipatory set? And I think when you ask questions that students have a good shot at exploring and like actually bringing their prior knowledge to bear, you do get that sense of community and motivation. The problem is when those questions become like a guess what's in my head type of
Yeah.
question. And now what are we doing? You have three kids in the class who actually have a little more prior knowledge than everyone else, so they're just confident. They're leading the discussion. And in fact, when I go and observe lessons, a lot of lessons begin with this guess what's in my head sequence, where it's just a conversation between two or three kids. And so what I would prefer rather than pre-questions are still questions, but they're questions that draw on prior knowledge of the learner so that they're easy questions. They're questions everyone can answer, and the questions build on each other in such a way that now we're at the content and we all have a shared knowledge base that we have with each other. We weren't spending our time guessing. We were spending our time retrieving knowledge that we all have so that we can take that and use it to stick on the next part of the lesson. I find that to be a better use of the time.
Okay, I'm just
Um,
going to say that was a really good answer.
yeah.
I'm against you in the argument here, but I was nodding a lot for that one. Yeah.
You're shooting yourself in the foot, Bradley. So I think, Zach, this is another one for you, which is quite interesting, I think. What about students asking their own pre-questions? Do you think that is a good use of the pre-questions? Say something they don't know or want to know about a topic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Students don't typically know what they don't know. They're novices for a reason, right? But there are starting points. You can start with everyone. Like in the example of Easter Island we keep bringing up, right? You could ask questions that relate to vacations they've been on in the past, or you could ask questions about what they know about Easter Island, and they all talk about those statues, whatever else, right? You can begin with students writing down their questions, and then, like Bradley said before, comparing to what we've learned. Just know that these sort of orientation type tuning in activities, how I call them, they really shouldn't last that long, because we've got to get into this content, because most of this you don't know, right? So that would be my answer to it.
And for the record, yeah, I'd actually agree. Like, I think intuitively, I don't like the idea because people don't know what they don't know, and we should honor teacher expertise. Is you have subject knowledge, you've thought deeply about the curriculum. Yes, I want to make sure people learn stuff that they find interesting, but on the same basis, I can see how that could quickly go wrong and get guided by the least knowledgeable and experienced person in the room. So yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
Cool. Thank you very much. Um, Bradley. Oh no, I've lost this one. Where's it gone? It was up here. Bradley. Is there evidence specific to particular subjects or age levels? And this, I have to say, taps into one of my concerns about the research. which I think is mostly been done with college students. If you're dealing with younger students, who it's compulsory that they have to be in a physics class or a maths class, they haven't chosen to be there. What about the research across different ages and different subjects?
Yeah, and like we should acknowledge, I think this is true for a lot of psychology and cognitive science research. The overwhelming majority of research is done on college students, is because that's who researchers have access to. But that's a limitation across many areas of educational psychology. But I think there is an interesting idea about reinforcing misconceptions, especially potentially at a young age. The hypercorrection effect that I mentioned earlier, it's really powerful as long as students pay attention to getting the correct answer afterwards. The risk here is if you ask the pre-question, young kids start off in many different directions, misconceptions get repeated and then treated as fact. So I think you need more crowd control, almost certainly, for the younger years if you're going to go down this approach. Because, yeah, left uncorrected, those misconceptions can spread like wildfire.
Cool. I'm just going to take one more question because I think it's, and then we will do our final poll and see who we can crown our winner of the debate. So I think the final question is any from Alessandro. Thank you. Do you think a quick online pre-question might be more effective than an oral one? My understanding of the research is that it was mostly online pre-questions they were doing. So I don't know if either of you want to take that one.
God, do you want to go first? Do you have any thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, I think the space that I see pre-questions being most beneficial would be where students all initiate their own answer without hearing other students' answers. And I see this, a teacher standing, at the carpet and asking these questions that nobody really knows except for the same two kids. I find that to be a very great way of sucking the motivation out of the room and prioritizing the responses of the most confident kids. If we were to do it, it would have to be in silence so that we're not spreading misconceptions around the room of what the answers are, and everyone has a chance to give it a stab. And then, as Bradley just said, the teacher needs to be very careful about orienting their attention back to that question and the correct answer when that comes up in the next part of the lesson. So, yeah, I would say the silent solo thing would probably be the best thing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Any further comments before we go to our final vote, Bradley?
Vote for me and I'll be your
No,
best
that
friend.
was, I gave you that one tonight.
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm still gonna be, I need to put forward the other side, so vote for Zach. But Brad, if we can get the poll up again, team, then let's see how our viewers have changed. Bum ba dum bum bum. Well, good news is we have no one voting for still no idea what a pre-question
Yeah.
is.
Job well
So
done,
at
Zach.
least we've cleared up something. That's great. We are, okay, so we have 100% answered. I think if I end the poll and then I think I can share the results, hopefully people can see. Anyway, we have a win for Mr. Bradley Busch. Congratulations, you have won our first Flash webinar debate. Massive commiserations to Zach there. You put forward an amazing argument. I am very much on your side still, I'm afraid. Sorry, Bradley. But the results are clear. It's a two-thirds win to Mr. Busch. Well done, everyone. Thank you so much for all of your comments in the chat. I'm sorry I didn't get around to talk I taught them through all of them. There's obviously still room for lots of debate, but it seems like maybe some of us will go off and try some Greek questions in our lessons in the near future. And I think we should definitely repeat this format, team, and yeah, maybe with the music and the silly costumes. But I'll leave that one to Bradley and our next guest. Thank you, Zach, for joining us all the way from America. That was amazing. Lovely to see you. And thank you to everyone on the call for joining us. Take care.
Thank you very much, everyone. Zach, absolute pleasure. You are too modest to say it in your part, but given that we're talking about instructional design, a quick plug for your book, which I think goes to the heart of some of these issues. Generally, your book, Just Tell Them, I thought is incredible and gives a real clear structure of how learning happens and what teachers can do about it. So everyone on this call probably has already read it because everyone's already read it. But if they haven't, I would strongly encourage everyone to do so.
Echoed. It is super clear. It's an amazing book.
Oh, there you go. Even better.
Woohoo! It's great.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Edward, founder of Inner Drive, and I really hope that you're enjoying this recording. If you think it's useful for CPD training, then can I point you to our latest teaching and learning resource? It's called the Teacher CPD Academy, and it's full of engaging modules, expert insights, and lesson materials that help illuminate cognitive science. But don't take my word for it. Scan this QR code into your phone right now to find out what it is and how it can help you, and there are even links there to book a free trial. Go for it.